How's it? And we are live. Welcome, everybody.
Hello.
How's it, Trace?
How's it, Roadster? My favorite day
Yeah,
of the week.
absolutely. This is the most fun, and it is so good to have you on the line again and to be talking about Power Apps and Power Platform and all this lovely stuff.
Absolutely.
Sweet. So today we're going to be doing our edit screen, new screen, data capture screen. Right?
I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be cool. Before we get into that, little in the news section-y piece, I suppose. There's a conference coming up on the 22nd, which is, I believe, next week, right? And it's going to be great. If you go to aka.ms PPOC, you can get registered and you can check out all the different talks that are going on. There's lots of really great stuff there. Lots of really smart people talking, and me.
And you, and you.
And me. I've got a super nerdy topic that I managed to tie back into Power Platform and sort of design practice and how I think about things. So I think that's really valuable, but beyond that, there's a lot of really good technical sessions. So if you guys are interested in the Power Platform, I'd really go check that out. It's going to be really cool. And it will be video on demand afterwards. So if you're watching this video from the future, you can pick it up. It will be online. Last time they did it on YouTube, so it'll probably be there again.
Cool.
Yeah. So without further ado, shall we get started?
Absolutely. So as everyone knows, currently, and this is our 7th session, me and Rod together, I'm abusing Rod to not only do some cool things together, but I'm also learning loads. So this is me sitting back and Rod's in the driving seat, and I'm super excited for what you're going to get up to today, Rod.
Absolutely. So what we're doing, maybe let's just very briefly recap what we've done so far. So far, we've built up a homepage for our app, right? We've got an incident management system that we've put in place for our business, and it's got a whole bunch of cool stuff in it. It's got our gallery, which will house all our incidents. It's got some filters, it's got some search, it's got some nice little UI pieces around. We've got some pop-ups, and we've got some help, and we've got some nice little icons in here just to make it a nice experience for people to have a look at. But just looking at the incidents is not hell of a useful, right? The first start of incident management is actually capturing new incidents, right? Giving people a place where they can actually capture it. So that's where we're going to start today. We're going to start with how we add data and edit data to our data source, which is our SharePoint list. So let's do that. What we're going to need is we're going to need a new screen, right? So you could do everything that we're going to be doing on our new screen. You could technically do it on this screen, right? The same way that we made our pop-ups, we could have a pop-up with all of the controls we're going to put into our extra screen. I prefer having it in a separate screen. You don't want to overload one screen with lots and lots of different layers on it and that sort of stuff, because it becomes quite difficult to manage then. If you want to maintain it, if you want to change anything, it can get quite confusing. So we're not going to do that. We're going to have a new screen. So the way we do that is I'm just going to, on the home page, I'm going to hit new screen, and we get a bunch of different options here. We've talked about before, the ones typically that we're only ever going to use are the blank screen and the scrollable screen. There are a bunch of templates as well that you can use. I find I just want to do these because I want to have control over what it is we're doing. We'll use a blank screen, but before we get into that, let's actually just have a look at the scrollable screen, since we're making a new screen here, and we're probably not actually going to use a scrollable in our app. So just to have a look at what it does. So I'm just going to add a new screen here. I should probably make everything a little bit bigger. Hey, I always forget that. How's that?
That would help this goal.
Cool. There we go. So here we have our scrollable screen. And what it does is it gives us a screen and it gives us a canvas, right? In that canvas, it's got this little button down here for add section, which if you play it, you don't see the add section button. It's only on the edit. And what the add section will do is it will give us another data card. So each one of these data cards is an additional screen essentially for us. And then if we go into the app, we get a scroll bar. Well, not unless I actually put something in one of these. Hey, let's just give ourselves a couple labels. We can add one in here too. And you can see we've got those there. Let's add another section. We can actually see it scrolling on the page. And we can scroll up and down, right? So you can have one screen that you can put multiple types of controls on. And that's quite handy because, again, then these different data cards, they all have a visible attribute. So you can have different sections that you can show and hide depending on what you want to do. If you have a whole bunch of controls, a whole bunch of information you want to have on one page that people scroll down, this is how you would do it. Typically, I don't like using it. I'd rather have other mechanisms for how to display a bunch of different information rather than having them scroll down a page, because people don't like scrolling. It's the whole thing like Google results, right? Nobody looks beyond the first three. The second page of Google search doesn't exist for all intents and purposes.
Do you know that that's actually according to Google Analytics, that 50% of people clicks in the first three? Yeah,
and that is a well-known factor of human life, right? That is just how we operate. So bear that in mind when you're sort of designing your apps. People don't like to go below the fold, as they used to call it in newspapers, right? The eye-catching stuff is right up front. So, but if you do have a requirement for that, the scrollable screen is handy and can do that. I'm just going to delete that out because we're not using that one. We're just going to put in another blank screen, just like we did for our home screen, and we're going to work on this. I'm going to call this our form screen, because we're going to use this screen for both of our tasks, right? So when we're dealing with data, typically we have two tasks. We have capturing data and editing data, right? We also want to delete data and all of that, which we can get to. But in terms of Power Apps, if you're dealing with forms that are submitting data, we're either creating data or we're editing data. And we're going to use the same screen and the same form to do both, right? We'll start today with a new form, and then we'll work on our edit form probably next time if we get through everything today. So I want to keep a bunch of stuff consistent on the screen. I want it to look a lot like our home screen. And so that will include all of our header up here and probably our little footer down here too, right? So you can, if you hit these, you can copy them. Control-C will also work, right? Actually do that properly. So we Control-C. We can then go to our second screen and hit Control-V, and it'll plonk it in place for us. So we can copy between different screens. So if you have built a bunch of stuff in one screen you want to reuse, you can do that. There are other ways to reuse things. The correct way to do it is using components, but that is a much more advanced thing, and it's quite tricky. It's a lot more like old school info path than nice modern day Power Apps, in that it's tricky and there's a lot of stuff you have to just know. So we'll probably get to that at some point, but for now we're just going to ignore it.
Okay.
And we'll copy paste. So I have my form screen, but how do we get here, right? We need to be able to navigate to it. First, we want to make our new, we want to make a new form to capture a new incident. So we need somewhere on this page where we can add a new incident in. There are a number of ways we could do it, right? We could move all of this down and have a button up here somewhere. What I'm going to do instead is I'm just in the top right-hand corner here, I'm going to put a new button. It's sort of up to you how you want to do it and what you think makes the most sense. I'm just going to put it in the banner up here. So I'm going to add a new icon like we have before. They don't have a nice circle plus, do they? No, I'd have to do a circle and a plus. That's fine. I'll just use the add icon. I'm going to move it across here, and I'm going to make it white. Now we've got this nice one here. I'm also just going to add some padding. I usually like adding padding to these icons because it makes it look a little nicer to me.
What does the padding do?
You can see there it's just on the size of the icon you have. It's just putting it into the middle, like it adds padding to the top, the bottom, the left, and the right. Much like you would in a text control in anything. Just makes it look a little bit better, but the hitbox of this thing is still that whole box. So when you're trying to click on it, it'll still do the entire thing, which is quite nice. And then I'm also going to just, if I can get this in something approximating a decent size, I'm going to add in a label too, and I'm just going to call this label, we're going to say new. It catches up to us, and we can again make that white and make it a little bit bigger. Maybe a little bit bigger than that. Maybe a little bit bigger than that. So a lot of my design process is really just faffing around with sizes and seeing what looks nice and what doesn't. Right.
I think that's the same for pretty much every single person, believe me.
Yeah. So again, we want to rename these. So we'll say label new. Let's say new, and I'm going to group the two of these together. One thing here is you notice this is above our pop-up. So we made the pop-up last time, and we've got to be careful with that because now you can see that's actually above our layer here. So that A doesn't look nice, and B, they can still click it while the pop-up's up. So we want to be careful about that. And we just want to send this back a step. So we can reorder it, send it backwards a step, and now it is behind our pop-up, and we can't click on it. So I've got our group here, and I now want to navigate that. I want it to navigate us to our new screen, right, which is called form screen. So the navigate, there's a navigate function. So it's called navigate, and it will then present you like Power Apps does. It's really nice. It'll give you your different options. So obviously we're not navigating home because we're on home. So we're going to navigate to the form screen. And then what it can do is it has a number. It has Power Apps has a number of transitions built into it. So you can cover, which will take it from the left. You can cover from the right. You can fade. You can have no transition, which is usually what I do. And then you can uncover it as well. Let's just have a look at what a couple of these look like. So if I put it in as cover, we close our brackets there. And if I run this and I hit new, you see how it swung it over from that side, which is nicer than just a hard cut, right? Once we're here, we also want a way to get back to our home screen. So I'm going to insert another icon, and we've got they do have arrows. We could use the home icon, right, to go home, which does make sense. They've also got lefts and rights and ups and downs. So I'll just use a left here. We'll make this white. And I'll just add my padding in here to make it look a little nicer. See, this catches up to everything. Our icon placement here is a little problematic. We might even want to just move this over to here. And then we can have that on the far left-hand side. Sort of makes more sense to me. And then on select on this one, I could do a navigate and point it to the home screen. There is an easier way to do it though, in that there's a back function. And then you can give it a transition again. And back will always take you to the previous screen. So if you have an app where the navigation gets kind of complicated and you can get to many different places from many different places, it is often quite helpful to use the back, because if you have an icon like this, people expect it to take them back to the previous screen. If you do have an app like that, you also always want to put a home button in as well, if you don't just have a menu. But this, usually you wanted to take them to the previous screen. In our app here, it's pretty simple and it's the same thing, but the back function is quite handy in that way. And this is the uncover, and it uncovers it from that side. So we can go new, and it swings in, and then it swings out. Quite a nice little thing is, instead of uncover, if we say uncover right, then it looks kind of like it's swinging in and out. So it swings in and it swings out. That's like, I mean, it's sort of pointless, but it looks kind of pretty.
It's not pointless. How can you say it's pointless?
You could just have it cut, right? Hard cut. But it does feel quite satisfying. So I quite like that. So now we've got our screen and we can navigate to between the different screens if we want to make a new one. So we push the button and we've come here and we want to capture a new incident. So how do we actually do that? Power Apps is very handy. There's a number of ways you could do this, right? You could put just a whole bunch of controls in, right? We could put text inputs in, we could put combo boxes and drop downs, and we could just put them on the page, and we could add a button, and we can have a function that will then do the work for us and submit all of that to the right place. You generally use a patch function, and that can be really powerful, and often you'll do that, especially if you're using some different data sources. You might want to use a patch, right? If you're using SharePoint, there are easier ways. You can just do a form. In fact, for a lot of different data sources, you can just use a form. So we've got our forms here. It does give you the option for an edit form, which obviously, as it says there, lets you edit or add new. And it has a display form, which just displays data. I will tell you, don't use a display form. There is no point to a display form. If you want to display data, just have a gallery. Really, like a form comes with all sorts of stuff you don't need if you're just displaying data. We're going to put in an edit form because we want to add new data. So I add this in, and we can put it in place and resize it. And Power Apps is really nice because it's going to do a bunch of this work for us, right? So the first thing it's looking for is a data source. You see it's got a attribute called data source, and I can go and I can type my data source in there. We can also just click the connect to data button and it will pull it up here for us. Right, and here's our incident management type, and that's what we're going to use. So we can hit the drop down in the properties here and pick our data source here. We can also, in the function bar by our data source, just start typing. Hello. Should be able to start typing. Yeah, there we go. Now we have our data source. Now we need to choose what fields we want to add and to edit, right? So in our properties pane here, on the right-hand side, makes it very easy for us. It's got fields, and we can edit the fields over here. And we can say add field, and it will then let us choose what fields we want to add to our form. We've got all the different ones. So we want to add in the title. We want to probably add in the status, although we're going to hide that in a moment. We want the severity. We want the resolution details. We want the name. We want the incident type. We don't need the ID. We want the description. We want the date of resolution, the date of incident. And we want to let them use attachments, right? One of the really nice things about using SharePoint as a data source is it automatically does attachments for you. If you're using a different data source, doing attachments is complicated. So we go through and we're going to pick all of the different fields that we might want to edit, right? And we'll put that in. I'm including stuff like resolution details and the status and the incident type. Well, the incident type we want to pick, but like the date of resolution, which we're not going to be putting in a new item, but we're going to use the same form for an edit item, and that's when we'll want to do that. So I'm going to say add all of those, and we'll do a little bit of a thinky. And then it's given us this really nice, it's done all our work for us, right? This looks horrifying though. At least I don't like it. Underneath there, we have a couple of options. So you can pick the number of columns you want to do. I like to do it in a single column, depending on your data source or your preference, right? You could choose to do it however you want. And then do we want it in a vertical layout or a horizontal layout? And it does a bunch of this work for you. What do you think looks better, Tracy? I'm sort of partial to the vertical, but would you prefer a horizontal?
No, I don't like that. Because you know what I normally do if I had to build it from scratch is I would go and look at the width of the columns as well, and like how wide is the text that I'm going to put in, and I would never take it across the page. What is your personal preference? Would you rather have it like that?
I usually don't. You're quite right. That looks quite, that's a lot, right? That is absolutely a lot, but we can shrink that however we like.
Okay.
We can also, if I go back to my data source here, we see we have our form, which is the entire thing. It's a lot like a gallery, right? In that we have one control with additional controls inside of it. The way a form works is for every one of our fields, it gives us a data card. And that data card has a number of things in it as well, right? There's a little star if it's a required field. There's an error message if there's an error. You've got the actual, excuse me, you've got the actual place where you put in the data, which they call the data card value. And then they've got the key, which is the title of that, right? And you can change all of these things as long as you unlock it, which we'll get to in a moment. Very much like we did in our first app, right? Just like we did there where we customized that save form. This is the same thing, and we'll have to unlock it at every stage. But before we get that, if I go down to the properties here, I don't want it to snap to columns. And we have a couple options here. We could shrink the form itself, right? Okay, that's another point. So if we look down here, our default mode here is set to edit. And we've got an attribute for default mode, and that's set to edit. So what that's expecting is it's expecting to edit an item, but we haven't told it what item to edit. So when we run the app, it's going to say it doesn't have an item, right? Because we haven't told it what item it is. So we're actually going to change that to new. And our default will be new. And then when we want to edit something, we'll tell it that we're editing something. So now if I hit play, you can see we've got this. And we've got the scroll bar here, but that looks kind of ugly. It's in the middle here. The scroll bar, I feel, should always be on the side of the page. Yep. That's just my personal preference. So we're going to keep this all the way to the end, right? But then we can take our various data cards. You can select everything except the title, apparently, because it's weird that way. And that one. No. Okay, well, we can do those. And we can shrink them all down to probably about there, and shrink this down that side. And then we can do the same thing with the title, shrink it down so that it fits. Let's give it the exact width. What do we say? 986. So that's there. Step to columns is off there, and then we can just move this up so we're more or less in the middle. And that way we can get something that looks a little bit more relevant. We don't need this name column. So I accidentally added a name column that we didn't need. So if I go to the edit fields again, we can see all of the different controls we've put in, and we can then just say, I want to remove that name one, and it'll take it out for us. If we want to add a field here as well, we can add a custom card as well as the specific fields we have. So if I want something else in here that isn't in our data list, if I add a custom card, it will give me another data card, that data card 4 there, but it's just a blank one, and I can do whatever I want with that one. We're not going to use that, so we won't. Right, so we now have a form. We've got all of our various things in here, but I don't actually want all of these to display like this, right? I want to move a bunch of these around, and some of them I don't want to display at all at this point. So first of all, to move them around, we can, on here, you can't do it there. On the form itself, if we go again to our edit fields, In these, we can click and drag and move things around. So I want title, then let me pick it up, description. Turn on the columns. So try to put it next to it, which I do not like. So snap to columns will keep it all in one column. You can also, I believe, drag these around in here, but then again, maybe not. So we just do it in here. Doing it this way does do a bunch of the work for you, but you don't get quite the same fidelity as if you just put the controls on the screen yourself, right? So there's I'm
going to just say right as if I know exactly what's happening. I must admit I'm struggling a little bit tonight, Roddy, but I might be tired. But I know that I can rewatch this with a glass of wine and take it in small bite sizes.
So what I'm doing at the moment is I am just moving the columns around so that we have them in the order that I like.
Oh, that's right? Like column ordering on the SharePoint side.
Exactly the same, yeah.
Like the form ordering, got it.
Yeah. So we probably want title, then description, then the incident type, then the severity, and then our status, resolution, all of this. So title, that's fine. We want that as a text control. That's fine. Description as well. This one, we want it as an edit, multiple lines of text, right? Our description, we said we want it to be multiple lines of text. People might want to put in a whole essay. So we can, in here, as we're going through the different fields, we can change what kind of control it is that it's capturing. Our incident type, though, remember, even though we said in our SharePoint list that we'll just make it a single line of text, we said we're going to control what's available through our app. And here's how you do it, right? I'm going to change it from our edit text to allowed values. And that's going to give us a drop-down box. If I go and look at this, this is now a drop-down box. And we can determine what it's going to present to us. Let's go back here again. Severity, I'm going to also make an allowed values box. The date of the incident, I'm going to change it to just view text. Actually, no, we do want them to edit it. They might not be capturing it on the same day. So that's fine. Status, again, we want it as a drop down. Our resolution details, we want as multiple lines of text. So I'm just going through and and field by field, I'm making sure that we've got the right kinds of controls in place. Now that I've done all that, because I was moving stuff around, you see we lost our resizing that we did. So I'm just going to select all of these again and we'll shrink them up again.
I must remember that you can multiple select on the left-hand side because that's easier than on the form.
Yeah, it's much easier than on the form. And you, again, like you'd expect, you hold down Shift. And then what is the width of this? We went with 906 this time, so I'll just do this and change that to 906. And then that's looking pretty nice. Our drop downs don't actually have any drop downs yet. We'll get to that in a moment. But our multiple lines of text are multiple lines of text, our single lines of text are single lines of text. Our date pickers are date pickers. You can change the colors of basically everything here, the chevron background, that sort of stuff, what the hover color is. In a future webinar, we'll probably get into that. You can do the same here with the background here, but once you open this up, this is standard and you can't change it. So this is what the control looks like and you're sort of stuck with that. Just something to bear in mind. Okay, now that we've got all that in place, let's do our allowed values here, right? So what are the options available to us? Now in our data card here, data cards are a little bit different. They've got they've got their own thing going on, I suppose we'll say it. We'll start with the incident type. We've got a lot of the normal stuff, like what the default is, what the display mode is. It's got a visible attribute, right? But it has some other stuff. Because this is a drop down, it's got an allowed values attribute that will tell us what are the values that it wants to allow. And it also has some other stuff. So data field, the data field will determine what column in SharePoint it's writing back to. So if you want to ditch this entirely and just make custom data cards, you can do that. You just set the data field of that card to whatever column you want to write back to, and when we submit it later, it will work. So this is where it tells it, this little control, this is where you're writing the data to. That's the data field. And then the update on the data card tells it where it gets the information it's writing the data from, right? So here we've got the data card value 12 dot selected dot value. So that will be what the outcome of this drop down box is. It will take that, and when it updates, it will update the data field. And you can change that. You can mess around with that if you're creating your own. We're not going to do that, right? What we do want to do is we want to come up with our incident types and our severities and what those actually are. Now we could, in the allowed values here, we could just put that in manually, right? We could do well, if I go to advanced here, I have to unlock to change it, right? Just like we did in our template app, our Make from SharePoint app. When you have a form and it's built these for us, it's defaulted them and it knows how they operate, and it doesn't want us to change them. So whenever you want to change them, you have to go to the advanced tab and say unlock to change properties. And once we've done that, now I can go in and change things. So I can change it so that we can put in a list of values like that. And then if I do this, I can pick one or the other, right? So we can just do it there. I really don't like hard coding these sorts of things anyway, because if you ever have to use that again, it's a problem.
But also, I'm a little bit confused with this now, because I mean, I want to rely on what the options are in SharePoint, is it?
Yes, but remember our SharePoint list, we set to just be a single line of text.
Oh, that's right.
We didn't have it be a choice field. You could, right? And if you did, it would automatically come through here. It would do it automatically for you. I like doing it this way because I have more control over it. And I know if I have to update something, I'm going to come into the app and I'm going to update it. Because otherwise you get into the situation where some stuff you're updating in the app, some stuff you're updating in the SharePoint list, and it can get a little wonky. So that's typically how I like to do it. So we'll get back to our incident type now. For our severity, right, I'm going to unlock the severity, and on the allowed values here, we already have a drop down that a collection that we made for our severity, right? So if I go to call severity, we made it for our homepage here, right? So we already made drop downs for our severity and our incident type. So I'm just going to reuse those. So I've put it in there already. If I hit the drop down now, we get that for us already. So I'm going to do the same thing for the incident type. We called it call type. And so we can reuse those. If we ever have if we ever need to add a new one in here, right? So our severity, for instance, maybe we have a super, ultra, really not good. As soon as it decides to update, right, if I now run this, that's now already in my severity drop down here. And if I go here, it's already in here, right? If we just had the drop down in the SharePoint list, we could update it in the SharePoint list and it'll pull through here already, but then we wouldn't have it here. We'd have to go update this one as well, so that we could filter on it. I mean, there are other ways you could pull that out, but typically, so we can have that one collection, and wherever we're using something, we can then do that. So we have our incident types, we have our severities, we have all of that, we have the dates, we have our status, right? We don't have our status drop down, so we should make a new collection for our status. So just like we did the last time, I'm going to do the same thing. And we will call them off, so it stops trying to do everything below it. A new progress and solved or give it a second to process that. There we go. We'll just run our on start again. Remember, the app on start will do all of that stuff when the app starts. So then on our status here, again, I need to unlock it. And if I go to the allowed values of this one, I can change all of this to call status. And now we have new, in progress, resolved, unresolved. However, I don't want people being able to change that, right? I don't want them to change the status when they start it. I want it to start as new. So I can have the default of this, instead of being this item.status. In fact, that's probably fine. It's still defaulting to new because that's the first one there. And I'm going to have the display mode here, right? So the display mode is whether it's editable, whether it's just a display, whether it's disabled, any of those things. So at the moment, it's pointing to the parent display mode. So we have let's get the right one. We have our status data card, which is a child of our form. So it's looking at the forms display mode, which is not useful to us. I'd rather have it check on the form's default mode, or actually not even default mode, the form mode, right? So what we can do is on the status here, I'm going to do a little thing where I say if form, what's it called? Form 1 mode, right? So if it's actually go form mode.new. Right, so what this is checking is if this form is a new form, right, rather than an edit form, then I want this to be just a view. Otherwise, if I can type, I want it to be edit. So we can check on the properties of the form itself to affect the fields within it. So now, because this is a new form, we've got our status is in there as I can't change it. I know we're very quickly running out of time here. So very quickly, the resolution details and the resolution date, we don't want people to be able to capture now. So for the moment, I'll just set their visible attribute to false. And I can do the same with this one. So they're still in our form, and we'll use that next time when we get into the edit, but they're just not visible for us. And now the last thing I want to do is I want to add a save button. And we can see what that looks like very quickly. I want to add a new field. I'm going to add a custom card. We'll put it right down at the bottom for us. And in this last custom card, I'm going to put a button. We'll put it somewhere around the middle. The text of the button I will have as submit. Come on. There we go. And then our onSelect property, right? So the last thing we need to do is we need to actually submit this form, right? We want to actually save whatever data we have. And that the forms make it very easy. There's a submit form, and we tell it what form it is. So we have a function for submitting a form, and we tell it which form to submit, and then it will submit our form for us. So we'll just do test. This is a test. We'll pick a low severity. We'll pick a date of incident. We don't want any attachments. So now if I say submit, you can see the squiggly lines at the top. It's now closed that out for us. And if we go back here, we can see we've got our test saved. And it's in safety as it should be.
Ooh.
So it is very easy to do that. If I come back here, it's now got an issue because it's already done its thing. The last thing we need to do is when we go through to that form, we just want to reset it. So there's a reset form, which will put it back to its default state, right? So now if I click that, it should have reset that. Excuse me. Do not know why you didn't. Very quickly, we'll just say it's a new form as well. So the new form command will take a form and turn it into a new form as opposed to an edit form. So now if I do that, there we go. So there we have it, and we can submit as we want. In our next one, we'll go through a bit more customization in here. We'll talk about defaulting a bunch of these. We'll do some checks on these, some validations, make sure that the stuff we're putting in is correct. And we might get into our edit form and bringing those other fields back when it's an edit form. So that's been quite a lot, I think.
Yeah, that was a bit heavy for me, right, Francie?
I'm sorry. Hey.
Wow.
Maybe I should have gone a bit slower.
Maybe we should do the other ones in the morning. Wow.
Next time we'll go a bit slower. But
I don't
the
think
basic.
you went fast. I just think
You've had a heavy week, hey?
I've had a heavy week.
It's been a week.
Yeah.
The takeaway though is on the forms here, you can add an edit form. You can make it a new form or an edit form. You can choose what fields you want to put in it. You can change what types of fields they are. And then we can edit what all those different things are. So we've actually done quite a bunch today.
You've done quite a bunch. Can I just repeat that?
In this together, right?
You're right. We are in this
together. So yeah, here's some more people that are some more resources that are all in it together with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Alexa speaks to me from my bedroom.
Hello, Alexa. I won't say something stupid like order 20,000 pounds of dog food or whatever.
Thank goodness I had you muted.
Typically, the best way to treat me is to put me on mute. But yeah, that's a fantastic one. Next time we will carry on with our edit form and move along in that vein. So yeah, there are a bunch of places on Twitter that you can follow here. All very important. YouTube as well, absolutely key resource for me. I'm very much a visual learner. I need people to show me how it's done rather than just telling me or reading it in a text box.
I'm definitely changing towards that, but you know what's interesting, Rod? I mean, obviously, the world's changing, right? So previously I preferred blogs to vlogs because in a blog I can go Control A, Control F and find that spot because I don't necessarily want to read the whole thing. But how amazing is technology these days? As we know, even Stream now, you can actually, because of the transcriptions, you can search for a word in a video. So that's all changing. But that's been a thing that was a challenge for me in the past, is if I just want to quickly find that one thing, videos don't always work perfect for me.
No, you are right. I think when I'm learning a thing, I prefer the video. But if I'm looking for a specific answer, then a blog post is more useful.
I agree.
Right, it's more to the point. But if I need to, like, how do I build a menu? Like, that's not something I can get in a blog. I need somebody to take me through the steps.
Yeah. I agree. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah,
definitely.
Facebook is another fantastic resource as well for community, right? I don't book my face, but I'm sure the communities there are very helpful.
There are great communities, I must admit, but sometimes you find yourself on the wrong end of the community and you end up supporting.
Yeah, that's
okay. It's all good. It's all good. Anyway.
Fantastic. So I think that's
us.
Thank you, Roma. I saw a question pop up there and I was like,
I didn't even check the
Q&A. Yeah. Just Roma saying thanks for the session.
You're such a rock star, man. Thanks for being on the call with us. I didn't even check the Q&As. How pathetic am I?
No, not at all. So these do need a lot more time. I probably went a little fast this time, but we have more time, right? And we will be back probably next week to do another one.
Absolutely. I think what I can end off with, Rod, and I think that's also why it's nice for me, the two of us, we definitely have different perspectives and we have different experiences and expertise, but I'm a typical citizen developer. I would be that girl who would just build the half a good stuff for always because I push it from SharePoint. And it's valuable for me to learn the other side as well. Because I can already build cool Power Apps, but from SharePoint, if you know what I mean, with like limited modifications. So this is very valuable for me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and you can do that, right? And it sort of comes down to how much you want to how much you want to
Complicate things.
complicate things and customize it and what you want to do.
But it's also, if you don't learn the other things, we tend to stay in boxes, right? I mean, we see that so often in the industry, even with people who complicate things, they keep on complicating the things that they know how to complicate, if that makes sense, because we tend to stick to what we know. So it's good to step out of our comfort zones and to learn different ways, because that kind of like makes the experience better.
Even if 98% of the time you're still going to do it from the SharePoint point of view, I think knowing how to do it this way makes you more effective at that as well. Makes you know how far you can push it.
A good example of that, seeing as we've got another minute or two, just a good example on that, right, is that the week before Microsoft lists eventually hit our local tenants, right? I did a training, not a week, I'm joking. It was 2 or 3 weeks before it, but I did a training session with a company down in Cape Town. They do these ad hoc sessions with me where they ask me, Trace, can we book a session with you? And then we quickly want to build this or this in SharePoint. And then I kind of like sit back and I tell them what to do. Okay, click there, and then they record it and then they learn through it as well, okay? So I taught them how to build similar, I suppose, to like an incident register or something for projects, okay, in SharePoint, like from scratch. They'd never really built things in SharePoint, so I taught them all the good ways, columns and all of those cool things. And then lists dropped and they're like, what? And I'm like, well, I'm very glad you learned how to do it in SharePoint, because there's going to be millions of people building Microsoft lists, not understanding how they can modify a specific column or add a choice.
Yeah,
they just
at the end of the day, like that, everything you learn, you will use, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, just having that understanding is super valuable, even if you're not working in it specifically.
Or don't use it all the time, yeah. But understanding what happens in the background is important for me. You know, it's not just the easier the tool is to use, the more dangerous it is, right? I mean, it's a scary statement to make, but that's just my point. But anyway, Rodster, thank you as always. This has been an absolute load of fun. I really appreciate it. We'll get the recordings out, and then I take it we're back again next week.
Yes, indeed.
I take it you still have lots to learn, to teach. Actually, I've got lots to learn.
Much. We have scratched the surface now.
Well,
once we get this form done, then our app is inverted commas done, right? It's functional, and then we get to add lots of cool things to it.
We can definitely add some cool things. I'm excited for that. Okay, Roddy. You have a wonderful evening further, my friend, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you all for joining us. Ciao.